Hi guys, what we're going to go through now is your assessment requirements for your diploma. So what I'd love you to do is grab your induction pack and find your assessment schedule first and foremost. We're also going to go through now all of the assessment documents that you'll see within your induction pack and see how they relate back to your assessment schedule. So the first thing on your assessment schedule you'll see is summary of hours, number 1. And if you look closely at the assessment schedule, you'll actually see that there are 2 more summary of hours due. And this one's a really simple one because all it is a snapshot of where you're up to in your work experience hours, your observation, your teaching and your self-mastery hours, so that we can see where you're up to and just make sure that you're staying on track. And it's also really a great chance for you to check in and see whether you think you're falling behind, whether you think you're going to need more time in the future to finish your training on time. So the summary of hours is just a 1-page document that asks you for some totals. And when you're submitting that, all we're going to need is that 1 page and your cover sheet on top. We actually don't need to have copies of your log sheets at those assessments, just that 1 summary of hours. And then once you've handed it in, the assessor is going to take a look and they'll let you know if they can see any issues with how you're tracking with your hours. So that's your summary of hours, super easy. The next thing you'll see is going to be your written assignment. So written assignment number 1, and you'll see that in your folder. And if you look closely down the schedule, you'll notice that in the second part of your training, there is a written assignment 2 as well. So there are 2 written assignments for your diploma. One is more in relation to the mat work side of things, and the other is more in relation to the studio component and the reformer teaching component as well. So written assignment 1, I recommend that you actually start working on that right from the beginning. It is a fairly large assignment and it's not all short answer questions. There's programs that you need to write. There's also some programs that it asks you to teach and take somebody else through. So actually it's really important that you don't leave that till the last minute because you won't physically be able to achieve everything that's in that assignment if you leave it too late. What we recommend, the best way to go about it, is start your contact time and you'll learn, your first block of theory. Then after that contact, you can take a look at that written assignment and there'll be questions straight away that you say, yes, I can answer those because I've just covered that content. And then so on and so forth. Each time you sit a contact block, check back in on your written assignment and think, which areas have I now covered off? Which areas can I complete? So it's best to be done as a gradual support to your contact work as well. So those are your written assignments, number 1 and number 2. And then after written assignment 1, you'll see written exam number 1. So there are 2 theory exams, and those are closed book where you have to come into the studio at that designated time and sit a 2-hour written exam. Your first written exam is only going to cover the mat work component of the training. Okay, so you're not going to need to study up on the reformer or the studio side of things. You're also not going to need to study up on communications or the anatomy and physiology manual that is found at the back of your foundations workbook. There is anatomy and physiology in the exam, but the content only relates back to the anatomy that is found in the foundations workbook from your resources. So that's really important to know because the anatomy and physiology workbook itself is quite large and I don't want you to get confused with that. But inside just the foundations unit, there is a small amount of applied anatomy and that is going to be something that you need to study. There are also a couple of questions from the work health and safety unit, but not comprehensively. That unit is mainly assessed through your work experience with us. So note as well that manual, you do need to have a little look at it for the exam, but we don't recommend spending a massive amount of time on that. So that's your written exam number 1. And your written exam number 2 that you'll see on your schedule further down, that is like I said, relating to the programming, of studio Pilates, the programming of reformer classes, special conditions, and that's what those units are mainly assessed through that written exam number 2. So you won't be retested on the mat work side of things in written exam number 2, but you'll need to use your mat work applications if you're writing a program, if you're talking about postures. That is going to be carried through to written exam number 2, and that's also a 2-hour exam. And then after your written exams, we'll have a little look at the practical assessment component. So you'll see that there is a final practical mat work assessment, and that document is inside your assessment tab of your induction guide as well. And what's required of you is 2 classes, a intermediate level mat work class and also a small apparatus mat work class. So the practical assessments to do with your diploma, they are assessed and submitted via DVD submissions. And that probably sounds a little bit strange to you, but there's a good reason behind it. Number 1, we are a registered training organisation, and that means we are subject to government auditing. And so we need to collect evidence of all of your assessments, keep that evidence so that when someone wants to check in about our assessment processes and to validate the outcomes for the assessments that we're giving, we're able to present evidence of what students have submitted to us. So DVD submission, really important for that reason. And then the second reason is that we've found that students actually perform a lot better when the assessor is not right there in the room with them. It can be a nerve-wracking thing to have somebody watching you teach and watching you roll out a live session. And so if we can not be in the room and able to look at your assessment at a later date, and also to validate with our co-assessors if we need to, if we need another opinion, to be able to rewind and fast forward and watch back parts of it, that's the reason why a movie submission is needed. So that final practical mat work assessment, we said there's an intermediate level class and a small props class. The small props class can be at a level of your choosing, and both of those assessments you need to be teaching to a minimum of 4 people. And that's actually part of the hard core requirement of the course. So that is definitely something that cannot be altered. We're unfortunately not able to assess if you've got less than 4 people in your submission. Okay, so the people that are going to be bodies for you in your practical assessments, we want to see you teaching the people that you've been working with in your work experience hours. So certainly making sure that right at the beginning of your work experience teaching hours, you've spoken to your clients and you've said, I'm going to be working with you up to the point where hopefully you can participate in my final practical assessment. So you're able to book the studio space to do those assessments for sure, and using a video camera, a laptop, whatever works for you. It doesn't need to be a large scale production. We just need to be able to see you and your clients. We need to be able to hear you clearly. And that's really all there is to it. As long as we can see and hear you and your clients, that's the major requirement there. And then you're going to need to pop that onto a USB stick in an MOV format, or MP4 format is fine as well. That's what's going to be usable for our assessors to assess you. So that's the final practical mat work. Then there's also a final practical reformer class as well. And that is an intermediate level group reformer class that you'll have to film yourself teaching. The task sheet for that assessment is also in that assessment tab in your folder. And again, a minimum of 4 people is an absolute requirement for that intermediate level class. And then your last practical assessment is your studio assessment. That task sheet as well, you can find that in your assessment guide. And there are 2 movie submissions. There's going to be an initial consultation and also a studio semi-private appointment where you're teaching 3 different clients at the same time, completing their own personal programs. So if this all sounds very scary, don't worry, you're right at the beginning of your training and you're going to be taken step by step through how to do all of these things. This video is just here as a nice reference for you as you're completing your assessments to make sure you understand what you need to do. So again, USB submission, and remembering that we do keep the USB, so making sure that you give us a copy and that you keep a copy as well for your own reference. It's really important that you watch the videos yourself before you submit. If you're not happy with them for any reason, we would prefer that you film them as long as there's ample time. So if your practical assessment is due on a Saturday, let's not film it on a Friday. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time, perhaps a week in advance, just in case something technical happens with your video camera, just in case one of your bodies pulls out and then you don't have 4 people anymore, just in case you perform and you're not happy with it and you want to do it again, you want to do more practice. Just give yourself plenty of time. There's absolutely no harm in doing a practice run a little sooner than the due date. So those are your practical assessments. And then you'll see as well, your final assessments are made up of your log sheets that are finished. We've already talked about how to complete your log sheets as part of the work experience video, so if you need to check back in on that, definitely do. You're also going to need to submit your observation tutorials. So we haven't spoken about those yet. Part of your observation hours is just to complete a series of short tutorials that are provided for you in your induction pack. And that's just you selecting a few of the hours of your observation and choosing to fill out these worksheets as you go. So you'll see that there's some observation tutorials for mat work classes, there's a couple for reformer, and there's also some for studio. And it just asks you to look for certain things, to maybe make comment on some of the bodies that you're seeing. So it's really an of the moment type of assessment. Because we can't really mark that, because we weren't there when you were filling it out, we don't know what the bodies were looking like as you observed them. This one is going to be for viewing of completion only. So you still need to hand them in. We won't be marking them and giving them back. We just want to see that they are completed. So it's up to you when you decide to do those observation tutorials. It's just a bit of a guide so that you're not just sitting back and observing the class as a whole. It's helping you to pinpoint what are the things that makes that class great and how could you apply that to your teaching as well. So that's what your observation tutorials are. And then the last component is your self-directed learning tasks and your repertoire self-audits. So those kind of come together. Self-directed learning tasks, they are just some written questions, quite similar to the written assignments, that are just there to give you some extra practice and help prompt you to keep learning the right content as you go. So that can be started right from the beginning again, just like your written assignment, and you're just filling that out as you go. Part of the self-directed learning tasks is also a series of programs that you have to sign off that you have A, done it in your own body, and B, taught it to somebody else. So you'll see there's some pages in that document that say, here's a program, these are the dates that I went through it in my own self-mastery, and here are the dates that I taught that program to somebody else. So again, very important not to leave the self-directed learning tasks right to the end, because otherwise you're not going to be able to achieve that more practical component of the document. And then the other side of that is your repertoire self-audit. So there are 2 repertoire self-audits, one that relates more to the mat work and then the one that relates more to the apparatus. And this is just, again, a series of tables for self-reflection that has all the repertoire listed that you're learning in your course, and you're going to need to tick off when you feel like you're confident in doing the exercise yourself, and then secondly, when you feel like you're confident in teaching the exercise too. And if you don't, there's a section where you write the exercises that you would prefer to go over again, and we can flag that with the faculty, and someone can take you through that content again, or we can arrange for it to be included in your self-mastery studio sessions too, because that's going to help really cement it in your own body. So that's the repertoire self-audit and the self-directed learning tasks. So we've been through all of the actual assessments. Now I just want to touch on how the correct assessment process is going to go. So with all those documents that are there for you, we need you to fill out a cover sheet, an assessment submission form that just has your name, your details, and you'll see blank copies of that inside your induction pack as well. And so we just want to see that document with the assessment cover sheet on top, staple in the corner, no portfolios, no plastic sleeves, no fancy binding. Because we have to store all of the assessments, all of that just goes to waste. So truly we just want to see the paper and the staple. And all assessments must be typed. So with your written assignments, you'll see it looks like maybe you should write into them. That is actually just to give you an idea of how big an answer that we would like. But we do need to have all of your assessments typed up so they're easy for the assessor to read. If it's a program that you'd like to submit that you have handwritten, as long as it's very clear and clean, not a problem at all, but for the most part, typed. We also require for you to hand in your assessments in person. So you'll need to hand in your assessments to the Myaree reception, so our headquarters reception, to one of the PFI or PTI staff, so that they can formally process it. Yeah, we have a system so that none of your assessments are going to go missing, and that's why it's really important that we follow that same procedure. If you live regionally, absolutely we can arrange for them to be posted in. We just don't accept any via fax or email. All right, if you are regional, one more thing actually, and you do need to arrange a different time and place to sit your written exam in your town, in your hometown, we can certainly do that just by coordinating with a justice of the peace who will sit and supervise your exam. So if you're in that boat, just contact us, make sure that we're aware of it, and we can arrange all of that with you. Okay, I think that's all for our assessments. Always let us know if you have any questions, and keep referring back to the documents in your induction pack and your assessment schedule as well.